what we're about. We're not talking about an additional tax sitting on top of the existing tax burden. We're talking about a tax shift off earnings, off profits, off the productive economy onto the non-productive element of the economy. What Alta's been doing in the last 10 years is first getting the party to reaffirm its in-principle support for a land value tax, which it did 5 years ago. Very specifically, we committed to reforming the business rates to make sure that the occupier of business premises would not pay, but the site owner would pay, and that would include owners of vacant sites and underused sites, which are potentially of very high value. But also we approved, in principle, for the longer term, a shifting of the tax onto land values more generally. What we've done since the last tax commission, and which we're hoping to work through the current tax policy working group in the party, is to actually set out more detailed steps, potentially to cover all forms of land. And that's what the piece of paper on your chairs was about. We call it low tax as a sort of branding, because what we want to emphasise that it is a way of lowering other taxes. You can only do that, of course, if you raise that revenue elsewhere. But if you raise it from something which has less of a burden on the economy, then pound for pound, for every tax you reduce, for every pound that you raise from land values, you should be able to reduce by more than £1 the taxes on other things. Because if you are reducing the tendency for firms to go out of business and therefore for the unemployed to require benefits, therefore the economic value of a tax on land values is pound for pound better than other taxes. We deal with the very sensitive political issue of the, I was told this morning was known as the Devon widow, by ensuring that for a principal residence, an owner-occupier would have a tax-free allowance, just as people who are earning have a tax-free allowance. And one of the most successful parts of the coalition has been the raising of that tax-free allowance on earnings. There's no reason why in principle, and this is in a sense a sort of citizen's income, a right to have somewhere to live and to be the owner of that property, there's no reason why that should be a tax-free allowance. And we would set that at naturally the sort of level that would make more voters see their tax bills reduced overall than would see them increased, because there would be big increases in the tax burden on some of the most wealthiest, but a large number of people would see relatively small decreases. That's practical politics for you. So that's the tax-free homestead allowance is one device. We would also see the possibility of merging the property tax systems within the existing income tax and corporation tax systems, as happens now in Sweden, using the device of imputed income or notional rental income, which is basically, were you to rent the house that you live in, what income could you get from renting it? That would then be treated as income that you were actually getting, but then you could offset against that income, which would be taxable income, you could offset your tax-free allowance, which would be much increased above what we have now as earning allowance. So the poor widow, who may have very little income and therefore not really use all of her tax-free allowance on earned income, would be able to use her homestead allowance. The two would be merged. And what happens in Sweden, you fill in the tax form which says where you live, and you tick the box whether or not you own it, and the authorities work out what your tax bill is based upon the value of the site that you happen to occupy with your home. Counterintuitively, that might actually spread home ownership, because if you were a buy-to-let landlord, you would be paying all the tax on all the properties that you own, unless you gave a share of the equity to your tenants to allow them to tap into their homestead allowance. So you'd be allowing a lot more people who are currently stuck in the rental market with no prospect of ever getting on the property ladder to actually be property owners or be in a shared equity property. But that's a start. So we have tried through this leaflet, which we'll be trying to persuade our colleagues like Toby at the back there, the tax policy working group, to sign up to. And we're flexible, we are open to discussion, and maybe that discussion can start tonight. We're open to discussion on various ideas along these lines, but we think that what we've come up with is in conformance with the remit that the Tax Policy Working Group has given, which is to shift taxes off earnings and onto wealth, and to make it simpler, and we do that by incorporating it within the income tax and corporation tax system, single tax bill to every taxable entity in the country, and we also hopefully will make it a vote winner, and leave that for debate later.